talking about the Jagat Vriksha. Just to give you an overview, yes, of course, we always start our Gita Chintane, Mahabharata Chintane with Vyasa's first sloka, Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet. So the Prakriti, the discussion about Prakriti is for the first 2.5 verses, as you all know. So Harish Ji, who lives in New Jersey in the US, and I think, by the way, New Jersey voted overwhelmingly to the Democrats, I think. Congratulations to you. Everybody is happy there in your part of the world. So Harish is from New Jersey in the US, and he is going to do the summary today for us. Harish, the stage is yours. I'll go to the next slide. You're muted.
Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanura Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Vyasaya Bhavanashaya Shrishaya Gunarashaye Hridyaya Shuddha Vidyaya Madhvaya Chanamo Namah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This truly is a global setting. So Hari Om, and thank you all for indulging. As Madhusudan mentioned, my name is Harish. I live in Moorestown, a small town outside about an hour and a half from New York. And I've been participating in these sessions for the past couple of weeks. And I should admit that it's been absolutely fascinating. I've been catching up on a lot of the old talks, and it's been really been indulging in this in the past few days. So thank you all, and thanks for all the organizers as well. So I'll start with offering the three shlokas from Bhagavad Gita to start with, and then we can do a quick recap. And then I have a couple of thoughts. As I was chewing on this, I had a couple of thoughts that I wanted to share that hopefully Madhusudan ji can give a bit more insight as well. So that's how I will. I hope to take no more than 3 or 5 minutes. So Madhusudan, if you would go to the next page, I'll quickly do the three shlokas. Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha. Atha Panchadashodhyayah Purana Purushottama Yogaha Shri Bhagavanuvacha Urdhva Mula Madhashakham Ashvatham Prahuravyayam Chandamsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavit Adaschordvam Prasutastasya Shakhaha Guna Pravriddha Vishaya Pravalaha Adasya Mulyannanusantatani Karmanubandhini Manushya Loke Narupamasyeha Tathopalabhyate Nanto na chadir na cha sampratishtha Ashvathamenam suvirudha moolam Asanga shastrena dridhena chitva. So as we were to recap from the previous couple of sessions, this first 3 shlokas has a very powerful metaphor, and as was discussed, this was the metaphor of the inverted tree of life, and we have discussed that the primary root represents the supreme. We have different names. We call it Paramatma. We call him Brahman. In this case, we'll call it Vishnu. And the point is that it nourishes the entire tree. It nourishes the Jagat. And we do have secondary roots that's represented by the Mula Prakriti and the Chit Prakriti. I think you've called it Chit Prakriti and Chetna Prakriti. I'm thinking it's synonymous. But that is the aspect of Lakshmi in the form of Shri, Bhu, and Durga. And the Mula Prakriti that we talked about as the Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, and all the manifestation that represents going forward. And then the other branches is where it starts to, when the Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas starts to mix and life forms are created. That's when the primary form of that is Mahat, which is referred to as the Chaturmukha Brahma. And from a part of that goes on to create the Ahamkara, which is the Rudra, and then we get into this concept of Tanmatras and Bhutas and Indriyas, which has been discussed in quite a bit of detail, but it kind of gives a pictorial view of how all of this comes together in a tree. So that's the very powerful metaphor here. And if you move to the next page, as I would say that I spend the most time really thinking about the Chandamsi and the Paranani leaves, that particular pada. Because if you think of it literally, it seems pretty straightforward. It talks about Chandansi. You look at the translation. Chandansi is Veda, and Paranani is leaves. So leaves are the Vedas. But if you unpack it, there's a lot more to unpack there, because the first point is Chandansi literally gives you the meaning of a Vedic meter. And as Madhusujandi pointed out last week, that is maybe not completely. It's not. It is maybe one part of the meaning, but not the full meaning. So we really have to unpack it a bit more. And then when you start to think about it, okay, well, even if you take the meaning that it is the Vedas, how does Vedas? We know it's important, but leaf in a tree is really so fundamental for nourishment and everything that and for the tree to be in existence. Does Veda really have that prominence? Is the other question that you have. And then this point of the Namatmaka Prapancha and Rupatmaka Prapancha, really, opened that up for me at least. And because it really talks about transformation of matter. So we're just not talking about the four, Vedas as we know it, but we're talking about, something that's even more fundamental that gets into the Prapanchas. So that's how I understood it. So it is broader and it's deeper than just the way we think about Vedas at a peripheral level. And then when we start to think about leaf, the other there was also symbolism about in the Pralaya state when Vishnu is resting on the on this Ashwatha leaf. And then there's this point of why is this important, because it is what goes on to produce the fruits and the flowers, and then we get into the Purusharthas. So my point here is that there is multiple looked at when we look at this leaf. There's the Prapancha components. There is the the fact that it is the symbolism part with Vishnu. It is understanding what is truly meant when we say it is the Vedas, and the meaning that goes into the purpose of the leaf itself. So I mean, I know I'm just scratching the surface, but that's my point on my understanding of the leaf. And then what are the fruits? We talked about the Purusharthas, we talked about the Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. We went through the story of Mahabharata, which gets into evaluating which among the Dharma, Artha, and Kama is superior. And I think there's a very compelling argument that it's Kama that is more the driving force behind the other two, but not but always moksha is the one that is going to be more permanent and therefore occupies a higher state. So that's that's what we talked about in terms of the fruits. And then when we start to get into the gunas, there was two meanings on gunas that we discussed. The one part is that when there is equilibrium in the pralaya, then there's equilibrium between these three gunas. And any substance that has quality is what is referred to as guna. So I think we have to think about gunas again a bit more broadly in terms of what it represents versus the very rudha meaning. And then it was fascinating how we talked about how much it influences the Brahmanda and the Pindanda. And as I reflected on this, there's two full chapters in the Bhagavad Gita where there's a lot of focus on this guna concept. And throughout the Bhagavad Gita, we do talk about it quite a bit. So my own takeaway from this is, while we think we understand conceptually, what these things mean, there's a lot more depth in it. And it actually whetted my appetite to understand a bit more about the true import of gunas. And then there's the other aspect of guna, which is that which binds. There was a metaphor of a rope or a thread that strings things together, and in this context, it was the point that jiva, which is beyond the gunas, is bound to the material, the 14 15 fences that as we refer to, and it is the Lakshmi principle that actually binds those 15 into Jiva, and that part is also referred to as the gunas. So we talked about that, and then we started to describe Vishesha, but I'll say that we just started it, so I would say maybe we will learn more about it today. So that's, I guess, a quick summary. Again, it's been fascinating, and I'm looking forward to today's session as well. Krishna Arpanamastu.
So wonderful, Harish. Thank you very much for that comprehensive review of what we've done for the past fortnight or so. So moving on to the next slide. Sudarshan last week instructed me to just spend a couple of minutes just to recapitulate what we did, so that should lead naturally to the subsequent slides that we have for today. So just to summarize again, from picking it up from where Harish left, so there are 25 tattvas that Sanatana Dharma talks about, starting from Mula Prakriti and Mahattattva, Ahankara Tattva, Panchabhutas, Pancha Tanmatras, Pancha Jnana Indriyas, Pancha Karmas, Buddhi, yeah, and Manas. So make all efforts to memorize this and contemplate and reflect on this, because there is nothing outside this concept in science and in philosophy. So think about this deeply, think about this, manana, do a lot of manana on these 25 tattvas. It can be a little bit confusing, a little bit difficult, but as you think about it and ruminate on this, the shravana that we are all doing, then now we have to do manana. When you do manana, hopefully your conviction and your ideas will become more and more stronger. Okay, so those are the 5. Now the first 3, Vishnu, Mula Prakriti, and the Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, they form the Mula. So you have the primary root and the secondary root, as Harish mentioned. Then once you have the primary root and the secondary root, then you can imagine this tree growing up. So that branch, the major trunk of this tree is the Mahattattva. Then you have the primary branches of this tree. The primary branch of this tree divides into 3. So the Ahankara Tattva divides into 3 secondary branches, Vaikarika, Tejasa, and Tamasa. And then you can think about further branches, which is all the Tanmatras, Panchabhutas, Indriyas, and Manas. And that is what Veda Vyasa is saying when he says Shakaha, and I put the number 8 there, which means there are 8 aspects for us to think about. Mahattattva, Ahankara Tattva, 5 Panchabhutas, and Buddhi. So I've numbered them for you for your convenience. So 8 branches. So remember 25 tattvas, 3 roots, and 8 branches. So the discussion goes on, and then it says, the Pancha Tanmatras are the shoots of this tree, Vishaya Pravalaha. And why are they the shoots? The shoots are very tender, and they can be very juicy, and they can be very tasty. So again, it's a credit to our rishis, because our rishis are looking at the natural world. They're looking at the natural world and see what's going on in a tree, and then they are comparing it with what happens in the material world, what happens in the human life. So in this tree, what are all these monkeys and squirrels and all the birds and stuff? What are they doing? They are eating on these twigs, these tender shoots, which are nourishing apparently, and they are eating this. What are the tender shoots? Krishna says these are the Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, and Gandha, or the Pancha Tanmatras, which are the tender shoots, which means we use our Indriyas, our Jnana Indriyas, for example, Shrotra, Tvak, Chakshush, Rasana, and green, and Grahana that I've also labeled in green. So what we as humans also doing is we are also eating these tanmatras. We are also eating these tender shoots in our mundane life. So that is the concept that he wants us to think about in our own mundane lives. And then of course, Adaha and Urdhva also comes in this. If you think about the first verse, there is also Adaha and Urdhva. And if you come to the second verse, there is also Adaha and Urdhva. So you need to separate these two. So the Adaha and Urdhva that is meant here is, the Adaha means elements in the gross state of the physical bodies. Let's not forget, Chaturmukha also has a body made of Mahat Tattva, which is also a material principle. Rudra also has a body made of Ahankara Tattva, which is a material principle. So these elements in gross state in physical bodies are also called Adaha. And Urdhvam is the state in primordial matter, in Mula Prakriti, how they are in a suspended animation state in Pralaya. So that state is called Urdhva. So don't confuse the Adaha and Urdhva here with the Adaha and Urdhva of the previous verse. So moving on to the next slide. So what does the verse say? So let us recapitulate this verse. It says, Adashta urdhvam prasrutasya shakaha guna pravruddhaha vishaya pravalaha. Next line is what we are doing today. Adashta mulani anusantatani. So now what you should do is that mulani, you have to go to the first verse, and the adaha is the material principles. Yeah, so hold on to that idea. So mulani, as we discussed before, primary roots and secondary roots. Vishnu, Chit Prakriti or Chetana Prakriti, Achit Prakriti or Jada Prakriti, or the three gunas. So they form the Achit Prakriti. Those are the three roots. So when Krishna says or Vyasa says Mulani, he's talking about these three roots. And Adaha means he's talking about Chaturmukha Brahma, Sesha, Rudra, and everybody else. And he's building up this concept. So here, I just want to break for 2 minutes and get the audience to participate here. Now, on the right-hand side corner here, I always put this picture. Again, this is a highly metaphorical picture, not to be taken literally. And we have all dealt with this. Sanatana Dharma is symbolic. There's a lot of symbolism here. So this symbolism I put on the right-hand corner, where Vishnu is lying on this Ananta Naga, and then Lakshmi is by his feet, and Chaturmukha Brahma is coming out from his navel. There is this lotus, and he's sitting on it. Over several months that we have been discussing this, we have always discussed about Vishnu, we have discussed about Lakshmi, we have discussed about this lotus with 14 petals, and we have discussed about this Chaturmukha Brahma. We have never spent time thinking about this Anantanag, this Sesha, this poor chap who's sitting who's lying, on whom is lying Vishnu. We have never actually discussed about this Sesha. And I thought today I should introduce this concept about Sesha because he is important in this concept of cosmology. So let's not forget, we are talking about cosmology in the first 2.5 verses of Bhagavad Gita. So Sesha, I just want to open this up briefly for discussion. What is the understanding of Sesha, and why is Sesha the bed on which Vishnu is lying down? So can I have some contributions here, please? What do we think about this symbolism?
Hello, Madhu.
Nita. Yeah, Nita,
uh,
go.
Does that represent gravity or gravitational force on which everything rests? So, yeah, that's.
Yeah. Thank you, Nita. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you for that. Anybody else has any other views from Puranas and so on? The whole story of Garuda and Sesha in the Puranas is quite interesting. Any takers on that? Okay, right. So let me take this on. So Sesha, on whom Vishnu is sitting, is a very interesting guy. He is a very interesting guy in our Shastras. The other name for Sesha is Sankarshana. His other name is also Sankarshana. Okay, Sankarshana is synonymous with another word called Akarshana. So Sankarshana and Akarshana are the same, and they are other names. Sankarshana's other name is Sesha. So if you look at what does Sankarshana actually mean, Sankarshana actually means that which attracts. It pulls things down and it attracts things down. Of course, Sankarshana is also one of the Vyuha forms of Vishnu. His name is also called Sankarshana. Why? Because he attracts. In fact, the word Krishna actually comes from the root word Sankarshana, because that which attracts. And we all know this Krishna is a guy who attracts everybody. Similarly, that is why he is called Sankarshana. And another name for Sesha, who's another principle, he is also called Sankarshana because he attracts. Now, when I was thinking about this attraction and why is this Sesha got to do so much about attraction, and how in this primordial matter this guy is lying on, and if you look at the Big Bang and the current prevailing hypothesis, and as you know, singularity, and then there is a Big Bang that happened, that's what we are told. And then there is a phase called inflation. Yeah, and I was doing some research on this inflation that happened in the earliest stage of the creation of the universe. And there, the current view there is, the question that physicists are asking is around inflation, why did it not collapse instantaneously at that point of time? Why did inflation happen and then the universe expanded? So they keep talking about these kind of stuff. And one of the ideas that is put there, or one of the theories that is put there, is inflation then becomes a stable expanding universe because of gravity, because of gravitational waves and gravity. And of course, the current view about gravity is that this is a distortion in the space-time continuum and all that. So you guys can read it. But anyway, I found that idea interesting about gravity and how gravity holds the universe together. That everything is moving in order, everything is attracted to each other, and there is some kind of stability in the universe. And that is what the Sesha Tattva actually represents. So one other way of showing symbolism of Sesha is that he is supposed to be in the Patala and he's holding all this universe, everything is lying on his head. What that actually means is he's holding them through his gravity, and the whole universe is resting that way. So I hope that is interesting, because if you look at the Big Bang, and before Big Bang, when there is a point of singularity, there is also a symbolism of, and there is also a physics perception, there is infinite gravity. We all know in black holes there is infinite gravity, and it holds matter together. So all these concepts about gravity is not new in Sanatana Dharma. We have always had it for tens of thousands of years. In fact, if you go to Rig Veda, and we discussed it some months ago about how Rig Veda deals with gravity, and there are lots of verses that talk about, "O Indra, by putting forth your mighty rays, you possess the qualities of gravitation and attraction, illumination and motion. You keep the entire universe in order through the power of your attraction." The next verse is, "The sun moves in its own orbit, but holding earth and other heavenly bodies in a matter that they do not collide with each other through forces of attraction." Look at this verse, Karshana, that comes in Rig Veda, first mandala. Karshana means attraction. Yeah. So Rig Veda talks about gravity, gravitational forces quite a lot. And this is, several thousand years, at least 10,000 years. So this idea of gravity, somehow Newton, by his intuition, discovered this, is actually a myth. It could be true in the Western civilization, but in Eastern civilization, we have always known that gravity exists, and Newton was not the one who discovered it. Our rishis had discovered gravity and described in the Rig Vedas long time ago. Copernicus is brought in the Western civilization as the guy who described all the planetary systems moving around the sun. Look at our Rig Veda verse, it's very clear. It even goes on to say the sun also is moving around, but all other planets are moving around it. So we always knew that this was the configuration of the universe. So the Eastern civilization, particularly from our Vedas and Rishis, clearly from what they had observed or what kind of intuitional knowledge that they had, is far more advanced than what we are meant to believe from Western civilization and Western concepts. So I thought you might like it. And next time around, if you do see Vishnu lying on the Anantanag, please also think about the Sankarshana, Sesha Sankarshana, as the one that holds things together. Okay, so now moving on. So I want to pull you back now, attract you back to this verse. So this verse, basically, what does it say? Adashta mulani anusantatani. So we need to look at the adashta anusantatani. Okay, anusantatani means that which has pervaded in it. Adashta, ada means this mahattattva, etc., and the material world. This Mulani, this root, this Vishnu, the three gunas and the Lakshmi Tattva has actually pervaded Anusantatani. Okay. So what I have done here for your convenience is, on the left, I've listed the 25 tattvas, that is the material principles. And the Vedic system and the Vedic pantheon is quite fascinating. Behind every material substance, there is a sentient substance that controls it and regulates it, which is ultimately under the control of Vishnu or Brahman. So Mahat Tattva is Chaturmukha Brahma, Ahankara Tattva is Rudra. Then I've listed every Tattva here, and you will all be familiar, because in the Puranic times, many of these characters that are here have all taken prominence, and now we have started worshipping them. Say, for example, if you take Buddhi, Saraswati, Bharati, and Parvati. If you look at Manas, Garuda, Sesha, Rudra, Indra, Kama, Brihaspati, Chandra, Parvati, Brahma, Lakshmi. These are all presiding deities according to the Vedic pantheon. Look at your hands. Hands is controlled by Agni, Saraswati, Bharati, Parvati. Yeah, that is speech. Sorry, walk is speech. Pani is your hands. Indra is the controller of your hands, and so on. So the Vedic pantheon discusses all this. Now, Krishna or Veda Vyasa in this verse is saying, you know, these Adaha, these chaps are not standalone entities. They are not just standing alone and doing the transactions of the universe and looking after the universe. The Mulani is actually Anusantatani. It has actually gone inside them as well and controls them. Now, this is one of the ideas that comes out very beautifully in this verse when it says Adaha cha Anusantatani. I want to remind you of this potter chap, this poor guy who's making pots, and we have had him for several occasions in our talks. So this is the potter who's Brahman, and he is using Prakriti. And then he is creating various objects of the universe, such as the plates and the pots. Yeah. So these are the objects of the universe. The pots are the jivas with their bodies, and they go through samsara. So this guy is creating everything. This is symbolic representation, but there is a key difference between this potter who's making a pot and the Brahman who creates the universe. So who is going to tell me what is the difference between these two? How is the creatorship of a potter different from creatorship of Vishnu, for example?
Sushruth here.
Mm-hmm.
So Brahman is inside every one of his creations, whereas the potter is a mere human being. He cannot get into his pots.
Wonderful, Sushruth, excellent. Thank you very much. So that is the concept that Taittiriya Upanishad is actually saying. It says, so akamayat bahusyam prajaye iti. So this Brahman guy before creation, Lakshmi prompts him and he says, okay, I'll desire, let me create. So akamayat bahusyam prajaye iti satapo atapyata satapastaptva idam sarvam asrijata yadidam kincha tat srishtva tadeva anupravishata. Tad anupravishya satcha tyatcha abhavat. So beautiful verse in Taittiriya Upanishad that actually captures this concept of adahacha anusantatani. So the primary difference between God as a creator of the universe and a potter as a creator of the potters, both of them are creating the pots, but the potter doesn't get inside the pot. Whereas this Vishnu guy, he is so kind, he not only creates, but whatever he has created also he gets inside them as a cosmic antaryamin, and then he gives them three things. He gives them satta, pramiti, and pravriti. What that means, satta means he gives them the reality. Pramiti means he makes them the objecthood of knowledge, and pravriti means he gives them the capacity of volition to do whatever they are meant to be doing. So those are the three things he does. So when you look at adaha cha anusantatani, the cosmic antaryamin should also come to our mind. So moving on to the next line of this. Yes.
Just to clarify, is this Harish, is this also for sentient and non-sentient?
Yeah, absolutely.
He would do that. Okay.
Yeah. So it's for sentience as well as non-sentient beings. Yeah. So when you go to the last line of the second verse, this is interesting. Then, so adashta mulani anusantatani, then Vyasa goes karma anubandhini manushya loke. Okay. So we need to think about this quite carefully, and over the next 2 or 3 slides, let's spend some time talking about this. So far he's talked about Brahmanda, the grand scheme of the universe, how everything comes about. And then as soon as he has done this, he's given us that idea, he then jumps into Manushya Loke. So that means he is going into Pindanda, and he is also going into where is this Pindanda that is there for us. So he is going into this Manushya Loka. So when he talks about Manushya Loka, you need to be thinking about two things. Okay. So our sadhana sharira, our bodies, is also, as you know, is made of all the material principles. It is also a part of the brand adaha. It is a sub branch. Yeah. So the sadhana sharira is also Manushya Loka. This is our loka. This body is our kshetra, and we are inside it doing our activities. So that is a sadhana sharira. Now, where are we doing it? We are doing it on earth, which is a mrityu loka. So that is called a sadhana bhumi. So this manushya loka, which is our loka, earth is our loka, and our body is our pindana where we are doing it. So when he says manushya loka, both these things should come to our mind: sadhana sharira and sadhana bhumi, which is also mrityu loka as we call it. Okay. Now he says karma anubandhini mulani. So you will have to pick up these words from the previous line. So even this karma anubandhini mulani is under the control of the Supreme. So what does that mean? So before we go into that, I've got a question on the left. who does karma, because it's talking about karma anubandhini. We have done a lot. I think it was in the journey of souls, and I checked which section it was. It was the 5th lecture, I think, on the journey of souls, where we spent a lot of time talking about karma yoga, what is karma and all that. So let's not go back to it again, but very briefly, because this karma concept Gita is introducing here, karma anubandhini manushya loke, it is important to remind ourselves of the question, who does karma? Who is going to answer that question? Who does karma? We all know Jiva does karma, but humans only do karma, or all living beings do karma? Can I have some contributions, please?
I think, Madhu, it is all living beings, because we had this thing about an ant, and there's been a question about an ant and whether ant can have a karma.
So you feel ant can also do karma. It may experience karma, but by, for example, building an ant hill, by actually going around and eating the leaves, all those actions that an ant is doing, is that a karmic influence? Does it bring in a karmic influence to the ant? And I think the way I understood Deval is, your opinion is even the ants also do karma. Yeah.
I think that was my understanding from that lecture, though I don't know how an ant is supposed to have the mind enough to do it. But yes, I think that's what my understanding is.
Okay, thank you, Deval. Anybody else wants to contribute here, please?
Madhu, Suresha,
Yeah.
I think all living beings act, and they need to. I mean, if we interpret karma as just action, but it's only the human sadhana sharira where the karma, I mean, where one has the ability to do action that leads towards moksha. So this is the only sadhana sharira, the human birth. And I think that's the distinction between the karma in the human context vis-a-vis all other living beings.
Yeah, thank you, Suresh, for that. If we don't have any other contributions, we'll move on. So I think both Deval and Suresh are right in the sense that everybody is doing karma, everybody is doing kriya, everybody is doing action. An ant is also doing action. A human being is also doing action. In that sense, everybody is doing karma. Yeah, but the karma lepa, the imprints of karma that determines what happens to your future life and so on. The Shastras, the Vedas and the Upanishads tell us that kind of karmic influence of what we do happens only for those that have sadhana sharira, or humans. That is why our scriptures keep on telling us, guys, you've just come as a human being. You got 7500 years to go in this human being. This is your opportunity. This is the opportunity for you to do good karmas, so that you will continue to have good and better births, so that eventually you can go towards moksha. So this whole concept of karma influence, karmic imprints on the subtle body of the jivas, are primarily for humans. An ant does kriya, yeah. But the ant, if you think about Bhagavatam, you remember the 9 stages of creation that we dealt with in Srimad Bhagavatam, where that level of ignorance that comes in the 6th stage, and that ignorance then evolves. The Darwinian concepts of evolution goes from evolution from lower to higher beings of life. Similarly, the Vedic view of evolution is we go from higher levels of ignorance to lower levels of ignorance. A grass, for example, or a tree, for example, has got the highest levels of ignorance, whereas a human being on earth is supposed to have lower levels of ignorance, has more and more of intellect that has been evolved, and he or she is able to make that distinction between what is Shreyas, what is Preyas, what is Nishkama Karma, what is Sakama Karma, how if I do Nishkama Karma, I might be able to reduce my karmic influence and so on. So it is the sadhana sharira, it is your opportunity as a human that actually will dictate and decide what you're going to be in your future lives. So that karma, that is how the manushya loke, that is why Krishna has put manushya loka. He could have said trinaloke, Yeah, but he said Manushya Loke to tell us and remind us that this karma that you do is only when you are in a form of human. That is Manushya Loka. Now that karma bandha is there, right? That we are all linked with this karma. Even that is also linked or dependent on the Mulani. Who is that Mulani? Who is that Vishnu guy? Who is the Mula? So the fruits are bestowed by the Supreme as per the karmas done by the jivas. Karma alone is we have discussed this before. Karma alone is an insentient thing. It is a jada in its own. Karma as a concept does not have an ability to do things itself because it is a jada. And Bhagavatam again reminds us, Dravyam karmashcha kalashcha swabhavo jiva evacha yad anugrahatah santi nasanti yadupekshaya. So karma is one there. He says even karma is dependent on Vishnu and he bestows the fruits based on the karmas done by the jivas. So what is this karma actually? So last week we were discussing about the coverings of jiva. So you have this jiva guy in red and the subtlest matter that covers the jiva is called linga sharira. And then you have all the annamaya, pranamaya, vijnanamaya, anandamaya, koshas and stuff. So the Vedic view of karma is these are imprints. They are imprints, they are like dots that fall on the linga sharira. And when the body and the gross body is gone, the jiva still goes with this linga sharira, and based on its imprints, it gets into another body. It is really an interesting thing to study and think about what our Vedic rishis had thought about this reincarnation. So I've got pre-creation. Every jiva is, there was never a time except in moksha that jivas did not have linga sharira. So in that sense, karma has always been with the jivas. Yeah. And during creation, they get a gross body. God gives them the gross body. And through their karmic influence, they do various stuff in this world. So that is what the journey is really for us. The Vedic view, the Upanishads view, the Gita's view really is that is this journey. So we are the souls, we got the Linga Sharira, we got various karmic imprints. And based on what we do in this life, we may get another body, and that is the gross body. And then we will do some activity in that body, and then we will die, which means our gross body will go, but the soul will still carry on its journey with linga sharira, with karmic imprints, and then it'll get another body, then it'll die, then again it'll occur a body. So this is an eternal cycle of karma that happens under the control of the Supreme. So it is the karma. So you have three guys here: karma, soul, and samsara, and it goes round and round in circles. And there is one beautiful verse that actually captures this in Katha Upanishad, and I just wanted to remind you of that. And I also want to point out a key fact that most of you may be aware of, but just to remind you that the essence of the philosophy of the Gita is the philosophy of Katha Upanishad. Yeah, that is how it is. The philosophy of the Katha Upanishad has been, the juice has been taken and expanded further in Gita Upanishad. Yeah. So there is one verse in Katha Upanishad, and the background to Katha Upanishad, as you know, is Uddalaka Aruni has two children, Nachiketa and Shvetaketu. And Shvetaketu comes a lot in Chandogya Upanishad, which is part of the Samaveda, whereas Nachiketa comes in Katha Upanishad, which is part of the Krishna Yajurveda. So this Nachiketa guy, as you know, that there is 1,000 cows that this father has to give. He gives all diseased cows or old cows, and the son asks, "Whom are you going to give me?" He asks 3 times, and the father curses him. "I will give you to Yama." So this guy has to obey and he has to go. So when that happens, when Nachiketa's body is fallen down, the jiva is going with the linga sharira is actually traveling. So it is beautiful symbolism. So Yamadutas are actually taking Nachiketa to the Yamaloka to meet Yama because the father has said so. So when Nachiketa is traveling with the Yamadutas, there is one verse which is so beautiful. The Yamaduta is telling Nachiketa, Anupashya yata purve pratipashya tata pare sasyamiva martyaha pachyate sasyamiva ajayate punaha. So this verse is so profound. So this Yamaduta is saying, Nachiketa, look at the front, look at all these fellows, look at all these souls with their linga shariras. They're all going in queue. They're all in a queue going to Yamaloka, where they will suffer all the bad deeds that they have done. Look behind you. There are all these jivas that are also coming behind you. So they are also heading towards the Yamaloka. And the Yamaduta says, you know what? Sasyamiva martyaha pachyate. You know what? To die means to be born again. Sasyamiva ajayate punaha. To be born means to die again. So this Yamaduta is explaining these eternal cycles of birth and death influenced by karma in a very, very beautiful verse, this Katha Upanishad verse. So please try and read Katha Upanishad and understand the philosophy behind this. Is unless you understand the philosophy of Katha Upanishad, it can be a bit challenging to understand what Gita is actually telling us. There is another verse in Katha Upanishad that I wanted to share with you. Here, now what has happened is our man, our Nachiketa has now reached Yamaloka and he's having a discourse, philosophical discourse of great detail with Yama. And in the second Valli, Yama is giving him some information. And this verse is very, very profound. And it says, Na samparayaha pratibhati balam pramadyantam veti mohena mudena ayam loko na asti para iti mani punaha vashama padyate me. So what Yama is saying is, in this Mrityu Loka, there are all these fellows. They all think there is no Samparaya. Samparaya means moksha. Moksha means God and moksha. They don't think there is. Many people on earth don't even know that there is something called liberation, that there is something called moksha. So there is no moksha. These are all childish fellows. Pratibhati balam. Yeah. Pramadyantam. They do not have the intellect to discriminate between shreyas and prayas. Veti mohena mudam. This is very, very beautiful. And it says there are all these fellows on earth, humans, who are more interested in accumulating wealth due to ignorance. Veti mohena mudam. And they are all thinking, I am lokaha. There is only this worth. Nasti para itimani. There is nothing beyond this world. There is nothing beyond this material world of pleasures, and there is nothing happening there. And they're all in this samsara, chasing after material pleasures. And then he concludes saying, Punak punaha vashama padyate me. Again and again, these fellows come to me. I am fed up with these fellows. They're again and again, they're coming to me because their approach to life is the first three lines that I've told you so far. So that whole karma bandini manushya loke should open up our thought processes to think about all these profound philosophies of Katha Upanishad. Now look at our Catholic friends. We all know the story of Adam and Eve. We touched upon this before, but this is very pertinent and very relevant to this discussion of Gita's karma anubandini manushya loke. Look at our Adam and Eve. What did they do? We all know the story of the forbidden fruit and the Garden of Eden. And by the way, let me remind you, the earliest Christian art that depicts this particular Genesis chapter 3 shows a tree. What tree does it show? It actually shows an Ashwatha tree with fig fruits. Yeah. And do your search in the internet. You will find those images of actually that tree, that material tree with the phala is actually the fig. And what the philosophy of Adam and Eve, I don't know what our Catholic friends' philosophy is, but what is clear is this concept actually comes from Mundaka Upanishad that we have dealt briefly before, and it comes from Gita. So unless you understand the concept of karma and karma phala, you will not understand how they come to Mrityu Loka, because that is what happened to Adam and Eve, because there was this snake that tempted Eve to eat this fruit of desire, and because they ate, they came to the world to die. So this is Mrityu Loka, which is what the Katha Upanishad is talking about. Again and again you're dying, coming to this world, because you're just eating the karma phala. So until our friends in the Catholicism understand this concept of karma, they may not be able to fully appreciate what is the symbolism of this. Look at this, there is a snake there. Who is this snake? The snake is the Kundalini, the desire. And look at the etymology of Adam. Adam is not some word that has come in the European language from out of the blue. No, Adam's etymology comes from Sanskrit. Adam means Adi Manava. Adi Manava becomes Adam. Now, Adam also means Adama. Adama means what? Adaha. Adaha Shakam. Adama means low. down below. So he is in the sub branches. So he comes to the material world. And the fruits of the fig is karma phala. So there are so many symbolic similarities, and unless the philosophy of the Vedas is actually put into the symbolism, the true philosophy behind this may never come to our Catholic friends. But I just wanted to remind you that this concept has been in Vedic rishis for tens of thousands of years. So when you say karma anubandhini, think about this concept. So
Madhu, just
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. Just I think only when you're speaking in this context, we can discuss this. If it has gone into the Bible, how it would have gone into the Bible actually? Can you throw some light on how the Bible is from the Middle East?
Okay, so it's an interesting. There are various theories there, Sudarshan. There is various theories of what happened, but it is very likely that the access to Upanishads were available for the early Christian thinkers, and in the Bharatvarsha at that point was much more of an expanded land. Yeah, so they must have had access to the Upanishads. They must have studied the Upanishads. And yes, I know this is controversial. The history is still not clear. What happened to the Jesus Rishi, as we would call him, from his adolescence to up to he was 30 years of age? What happened? Where did he study? Where did he get his knowledge, and so on? So there are lots of gaps that are missing, I am told, by reading through the literature. So one point that you could infer from this is perhaps these ideas have been he must have learned some Upanishads, yeah, and he must have got these ideas, is one view. I'm not saying that is the view, but that it opens up an interesting reflection on that. How could Adam and Eve story come when our Upanishads in Mundaka Upanishad, our Dvasuparna Sayuja Sakhaya is just this, and our Gita verse chapter 2, the first 2.5 verses is all this. So they must have picked it up, is one of the inference. But yes, that is controversial, but that is only for this forum. And I have seen some literature available out there, and there are also literature that go against this. So I think we should leave it at that. But just to say that these concepts have already been in the Upanishads. Does that answer your question, Sudarshan?
Yeah, but I think the only thing is because we need, I mean, not saying this forum, maybe we may not talk much about it, but this aspect needs to be clarified because of various socio-political reasons, because, people, because there are a lot of people, I'm just warning all the people here, there's a very serious attempt to sort of justify, and books are coming out which says that, particularly from America and everything, with evangelical basis, they're saying like Hinduism actually originated from Christianity. So this
Okay.
people can quote this other way around as well. So we need to be careful. That's all. No. I mean, we can. I don't want to be a distraction. Actually, we can go for it.
Okay. Sudarshan, thanks for that contribution. So moving on. So
yeah, Madhusudan sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, something to add here. A few years back, I did read some articles and things saying that Jesus had actually traveled to Himalayas and he spent a lot of years in Himalayas. I mean, in fact, there is a book as well, which I can't recollect right now. And probably, I think that explains the link of this Upanishad concepts coming into Bible. That could be relevant. We don't know.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. Thanks, Manjunath. So moving on to the next slide. So this concept of cosmic tree. So this is quite interesting. Not only in the Upanishads, but also in various Samhitas, Balaveya Shaka describes this cosmic tree. And you would have you seen the English movie Avatar? In the Avatar, you have this cosmic tree and everybody goes and links with that. And it's a similar kind of concept, that cosmic tree. Balaveya Shaka, one of the words that Acharya cites, that goes into further detail and gives another kind of metaphor. It says Vishnu is the farmer, Achit Prakriti is the seed, and that becomes the roots. There are 3 roots, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, and they become the branches, which are the Panchabhutas, And then the branches become sub branches. Those sub branches are all the devatas and all the animals and all the humans, and we all jump from one branch, one sub branch to another sub branch. Yeah. And the leaves are the Vedas and the fruits are the Purusharthas. And as animals do, we all jump from branches to branches. We go from higher and lower species of life, and we act out of karma and so on. So that comes in great detail, what is called Balavaya Shaka. The first line, for example, is interesting. It says, Brahmava asya prutak moolam. Prutak means separate. Moolam means root. He is a separate root. Sammulam satvadayaho. Arvachina moolam. So it goes through details. Let's not spend time on that. But just to say that there is another view of looking at this through what is called the concept of the cosmic tree, which is also described in Balavaya Shaka part of the Vedas. So now moving on.
Madhu, just one quick thing. You mentioned about Avatar movie. Avatar movie, the Catholic Church was not very happy. They even protested. They tried to stop its release and everything. That's just news. That's all.
Okay, that's interesting. But just to remind you, Sudarshan, about this karma, I know certain Abrahamic philosophies don't believe in karma, but what I do know for a fact is Catholicism believed in karma up to the 6th century. And after the 6th century, karma was given up as a concept because, and I'm told the reason for that is, people were postponing doing good things. If karma is there and I'm going to be born again, people started thinking, let me drink and make merry this life, and then let me catch up in the next life. So it was happening in the society in the West at that point of time. And at some point, the karma theory was dumped by Pope, by Rome. That's what I'm told by authentic sources. So karma is not a unique concept. It is also been had its presence in Catholicism, but then it's disappeared after the 6th century. So read about it. It makes good, interesting reading.
Madhu. But at the same time, I think this is I probably many of the patients, many of the English people here, whether even they're not even religious, but they mention casually that what goes on comes back, like that. When we talk about life events with other people and everything.
Yeah.
So the karma theory as a belief is there, like with many people, even if they may be atheist, but they're still there. So we don't need a Catholic Church to approve it or not. So it may be that's what was happening.
Yeah, good. Yeah, thank you. So moving on. So now we are making Pravesha to the 3rd verse. So just to remind you, we spoke about the Jagat, we spoke about Brahmanda, then we spoke about Manushya Loka, then we said how in Manushya Loka, how the humans have sadhana sharira and how they play out their karmas. And so we have dealt with all this. Now what Vyasa does is, in the 3rd verse, he gives you a shock treatment and he asks you to think some bigger questions here to understand the greatness of the Supreme, who has not only brought this universe into existence, he has brought jivas into existence. He has given them body. He is giving them karma. He is making them do this and that and that. So he is such a merciful person that he has made all this happen. So he is to remind us of this, Krishna is putting this verse, Narupamasya iha tata upalabhyate na anto na cha adihi na cha sampratishta. So let's spend a few minutes on that. So asya rupam tata iha na upalabhyate. So I've just literally translated it for you. Asya, for this Jagat Vriksha, this universe, Rupam. Rupa means Swarupa. Swarupa means what is its nature, how does it stand, etc. So that is its Rupam. Tata, like that. Iha, in this world. Na upalabhyate, is not known. So what does that mean is, Krishna is asking you, Manushya Lokas, you jivas in the Manushya, you may have intellect, but still remember your intellect is highly limited. You do not know everything in this life. You do not know everything. Can any mortal fully understand the universe as it is? Can anybody understand this? I've got a question at the left. Look at the scale of this material universe. So on the left, I got the material universe, and on the right, I've got Vishnu. So that is what Krishna is saying here, or Vyasa is saying. He's saying, na antaha, na adihi, na sampratishta. Anta means what? End. Adi means what? Beginning. Sampratishta. Pratishta means what? Inside something and maintaining it. Sam means what? Sampurna pratishta, samyak pratishta, of actually getting inside it and looking after it, which is maintenance. Yeah. So if you look at it from the material world and if you look at it from Vishnu, So from a material perspective, Krishna is asking us to think ourselves of this material universe. Do we know everything about this material universe? I got a question there for a quiz. Which spacecrafts have left our solar system and how long have they been traveling? When will they get close to another star? So can anybody have any views? It's a quiz. It's a university challenge. So what is the answer to this? Which spacecraft has left a solar system? Anybody knows the answer?
It's
the
Voyager. I don't know the
Voyager
name.
left about 20 years ago.
Okay, so Ajit is saying Voyager. Sushrut has also said Voyager. Anybody
Voyager
else?
was at least 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think recently they repaired some antenna by radio control or something very recently.
Yeah, so Shishot, I'm really impressed. For an orthopedic surgeon, I'm so impressed because I didn't know this. I was just doing some literature search, to be honest, yesterday when I was doing this slide. I know Voyager was there, but I was going through for the details. Very impressive answer. Thank you, Shishot. So in 1977, okay, two spacecrafts were sent by NASA, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, some short span between them. And Voyager 1 left the solar system in 2012 and Voyager 2 left the solar system in November 2018, and they have been traveling at enormous speeds for 41 years. The Voyager 2 for 41 years, Voyager 1 was a bit short, 6 years less, but nevertheless, look at 35 to 41 years it has taken to fly at enormous speed to even get out of our solar system. That is the distance that we are talking about. Even our solar system, which we all know is a dust in this galaxy. There are billions and billions of stars in our own galaxy, and we can't even get away from our solar system, and it takes 41 years in a spacecraft. And there is also an estimation, apparently these two chappies, the Voyagers, are still flying and they're still sending signals, and for them to reach their nearest star system, it is going to take about 1.2 to 1.8 light years from now. Or the other way is, no, sorry, it is going to take them 40,000 years to get near a sun. And that sun, how near they can get to that sun? About 1 to 2 light years. So this is the scale of the universe. So when our Krishna is saying, Narupamasya tata upalabhyate na antaha na cha adihi na ta sampratishta, he is asking you to think about this grand scheme of the universe. And that is exactly what Acharya says in Dwadasha Stotra. He says, Bahuchitra Jagat, Bahuda Karanat, Parashaktihi, Ananta Gunaha Parama. He says, this universe is vast and expands and wonderful. Think about if this universe was created, how great should be the creator. So just to remind you, we are still doing Purushottama yoga. So we should think about every concept of the universe, how will it glorify the Supreme? So even when you look at the cosmic scales, it is unbelievable. Now look at on the Vishnu side, Antahana, Adihina, Sampratishtana. That means what? This guy is the Adi. Antaha means is a name of Vishnu because he destroys the universe. He is also called Antaha. He is also called Adihi because he creates the universe. And he is also called Sampratishta because he gets inside everything and maintains them. Does anybody know him? Does anybody know him fully? Is the question there. Yeah. So Bhagavata Purana captures this also very nicely. It says, Tvam Adihi Anto Jagato Asya Madhyamaha. Anadi Antam Param Brahma Nadeva Rishayo Viduhu. Mahabharata, Moksha Dharma, it talks very beautifully of this. He calls it Anadyantam. Even Brahma and Devas, then he is Param Brahma, but even Devas and Rishaya do not know him fully. Yeah. So he is asking us to think about our own small, we are not even a dust of a dust. We are so small in this universe. Our position is so small. It is like negligible, but still we make such a fuss of our lives. Yeah, he is asking us to think about this when he says, Narupamasya tata upalabhyate, na antaha, na cha adihi, na cha sampratishta. This is similar to Garuda Purana. That doesn't mean that he is not knowable. That doesn't mean we cannot know the universe. That doesn't mean we cannot know about Vishnu. What it means is, natad idrugita gneyam, nacha vachyam, nacha tarkyate, pashyanto api na pashyanti, mero rupam vipashtitaha. It's like touching the Meru mountain. That Meru mountain may be material mountain, you can touch it, but you still cannot see every sand, every stone of that Meru mountain. Similarly, you cannot hug that Meru mountain. So this material universe is like that, and the supreme being is also like that. Yeah. So now, with all these grand schemes that he is asking us to think about this bigger picture, there is nowhere in the first 2.5 verses of Gita that Vyasa or Krishna has said that this universe is an illusion. So far in the first 2.5 verses of bringing us to higher levels of philosophy, where has Vyasa or Krishna said that this world is mithya? Where has he said that this world is an imagination? He has not. And in fact, Vyasa Smriti says, Adbhutatvat Anirvachyam. Yeah. So because this universe is Adbhuta, it is wonderful, this universe is also called Anirvachyam. Anirvachyam is something that you cannot explain. Similarly, God is also he's Adbhuta. That is why he is also called Anirvachyam. So this is Vyasa himself saying both the universe and God, they can also be called Anirvachyam because you can't explain him fully. And Vyasa goes on to say, Vishwam Satyam Vashe Vishnoho Nityameva Pravahataha. Look at that word of Vyasa, which resonates with the first 2.5 verses that we have seen. This Vishwam is Satyam, Vashe Vishnoho, it is under Vishnu's control. Nityameva Pravahataha, it is Anadi Nitya. We discussed about these cycles. So those words are very, very clear. So from where we see these 2.5 verses, there is nowhere it is mentioned that this Jagat is Mithya. Mithya or Sadasad Vilakshana or Anirvachani of Advaita doctrine, nowhere is this mentioned in the Gita. Yeah, even in Gita 16, look at the 16th chapter, 8th verse. It says, Asatyam apratishtamte jagat ahuhur anishwaram aparaspara sambhutam kim anyat kamahetukam. And he talks about the Asuri Sampat, the lowest of the humans. How do they approach this universe? How do they approach this jagat? Asatyam, they say this jagat is not real. Yeah, and it is not created by God. And they says Anishwaram, it doesn't have God. Aparaspara Sambhutam. Paraspara Sambhutam is there is a cycle to this universe that quarks becomes electrons, becomes atoms, becomes gross matter, and then it destroys, it goes through. Everything is related to something. Paraspara Sambhutam. But they think there is nothing of that sort. And Kim Kama Hetukam, everything is for material pleasures. That is the nature of Asuri Sampat. Yeah, read that chapter. Look at this verse. For me, the take-home message was this 2.5 verses of the Gita, which talks about the material universe and the greatest creation that is there and the creator. Nowhere does it talk about that this universe is an illusion. So I want to remind you all that there are views around this. Think about this. Of course, what appeals to you, you capture. But when Krishna or Vyasa is talking about the greatness of the universe, how can this great universe be an illusion? We need to ask ourselves that question. So moving on to the next slide, and this will lead on to what we are going to discuss next week. So this Jagat Vriksha that Krishna has been talking so much for 2.5 verses, and we have spent 3 weeks talking about it. Look at this word Vriksha itself is interesting. What does Vriksha literally mean? What is the etymology in Sanskrit? To grow, that which has trunks, flowers, and fruit, that which can be broken, which is felled or falls down. Those are all the meanings of Vriksha. Look at our Indian languages that have evolved. Vriksha, Mara. Mara comes in Tamil, Mara comes in Kannada, Mara comes in other languages. Perhaps you can remind me in which other language it comes, because Mara comes from Sanskrit. What is Mara? Mriyate iti Maraha. And that is how Marana comes. The word Marana comes from Mara. Yeah. And we say in Kannada, Mara Tara and Kutidanodu, like a tree he is there. Amara means that which does not die. Look at Sharira that we use. We don't think about the etymology of this. What is Sharira means? Shiryate iti Shariraha. That which falls down is Sharira. So When you think about this vriksha, it therefore becomes Ashwatam when you look at the material world, from singularity to the universe and to the big crunch. And it also becomes Ashwatam for our own body. Yeah. So now the question is, now we have understood that we are going round and round in circles. Yeah. How is this happening, and how do we get out of this quagmire? And in the third verse, the second half of the third verse, is where Krishna starts this big philosophy. He says, Ashwattamenam suviruda moolam asanga shastrena drudena chitva. It is such a beautiful verse. We will briefly talk about this for this week, and maybe expand this further for next week. So let's split it out. Yena Ashwatam, for this Ashwata, which could either mean the universe or man and woman. Suvi Ruda Moolam. Moolam means root. Suvi Ruda. Ruda means deep. Moolam means root. Look at the words that Krishna or Vyasa is using. We should look at these words carefully, not just look at the superficial sense of it. Even the way in which he has placed this word is significant. He could have just said moolam. No, he said ruda moolam. Root means deep roots, saying that this material existence has deep roots. And he didn't just say ruda moolam, he said viruda moolam. He said very deep roots. He just didn't say viruda moolam, he said suviruda moolam. So many adjectives. He said this world, this body, you in samsara, this world is samsara, is extremely very deep rooted. So that should give us an idea that this is a hard job. This is a hard task at hand for us. If this root of us being stuck to the samsara is so strong and deep and very tight, how do we take it out? Okay. And he gives a hint there in the next line. He says, Drudena asanga shastrena chitva. Chitva means cut. We'll come to that word later. Drudena means strong or firm. Shastra means a weapon. Okay. Drudena shastra. So a strong weapon. So what is shastra? As soon as you think about shastra, you should think about shastra. And we have done it in Brahmasutras. Shastra yonitvat, that knowledge, that you gain knowledge through the shastras. So knowledge is the weapon. Drudena shastrena, that shastra is the knowledge. We have done Purushottama. There is a verse, tam evam vidwan amrita iha bhavati na anyaha pantaha ayanaya vidyate. Very clear sentences from Rig Veda. Tameva vidwan, without knowledge, you cannot do anything. Yatartha jnana, that is true knowledge of knowing things as they are. And that firm knowledge is your weapon. And how is that weapon supposed to operate? Asanga shastrena. Asanga means what? One meaning is non-attachment. Non-attachment to what? Non-attachment or detachment to material things. And we all know in chapter 2, 62-63, there is a very important verse. Dhyayate vishayan pumsaha sangasteshu upajayate. Sangat sanjayate kamaha, kamat krodo abhijayate. And it goes on. So remember that sangha. Sangat sanjayate kamaha, that attachment is a root for everything. And Krishna is saying here, asanga shastra. So you need to start thinking about that detachment. Okay. But is that detachment easy? It's all theory that I'm telling you here today, but we all know as practical human beings that detachment from samsara is not an easy business. So Vyasa is saying there, or Krishna is saying, yes, it's difficult, but I'll give you an easy tool to do this, because that clue is in that word itself, asanga, shastrena. So what you have to do is chadayanti iti chandamsi. So you should break your words to understand the philosophy there. So when I say asanga, I have to break a, sanga, and shastra. Okay, let's go to the next slide to break this open. What does mean? Maha Upanishad defines iti Brahma. And we know in Tamil, agara mudala எழுத்தெல்லாம் ஆதி பகவன் முகற்றே உலகு. Yeah. So iti Brahma, Maha Upanishad. And that Brahma, what is his definition? Atakasmad uchyate brahmeti bruhanto hi asmin gunaha. That being who is infinite in time, infinite in space, infinite in attributes, Brahma Shabdashta Vishnaveva. And we described that when we did the Brahmasutras. And look at 10th chapter, Krishna himself is defined. Aksharanam akaro asmi. Yeah. So in the 10th chapter also, it's very clear that A is Aksharanam Akarosmi. I am that letter A, because A iti Brahma is what Mahaitareya Upanishad is done. So when we look at Asanga, we should split it open and understand A means attachment to this supreme being. So attachment to Urdhva Mula. So Urdhvaha Vishnuhu, therefore Dridena Asanga Shastrena Chitva. So with a firm attachment to the supreme and knowing him as the greatest being that ever exists, he is our only route for salvation. Use that weapon, and then you will have a chance of disentangling yourself from samsara. Now I'm going to break this session open to ask the question, why should we be attached to the supreme and use that as our weapon to get rid of the samsara? So who is going to answer that, please? Any contributions?
Madhu Suresha, he is the only
Yeah.
one who can do it for us.
Why?
Sushruth here.
He's answering that question.
Yeah.
No, I think everyone needs to have a target in their journey. There's no point in wandering aimlessly. So that is the best target to have.
Okay,
So
thank you.
if you aim for that, then that will be good.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's a good approach, Sushruth. Any other takers, please? So Shweta, let's remember. Ajit, come on, Ajit, go on.
Sorry, I mean, I was just trying to think that it may be using the mind to reach him, because the soul, that's the indestructible, to try and get to him, and that's the only way that we can break, because everything else is destructible in this universe, the physical body. So the only way we can break away from it is by focusing the soul or the jiva onto the supreme.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Ajit. So I got a clue on the right-hand corner here. We come to this whole Shodashakala Purushaha business. Yeah. So think about that right-hand side corner, because Shvetashvatara Upanishad, when we did Brahmasutra, when we talked about Janmadhyasya Yataha, I just want to remind you here, Shvetashvatara Upanishad says, Samsara Moksha Sthiti Bandha Hetuhu. That's how he describes the supreme being. Samsara Moksha Sthiti Bandha Hetuhu. He is the fellow who is responsible for putting us in samsara. Skanda Purana says, Bandako Bhavapashena, Bhavapashascha Mochakaha, Kaivalyadaha Param Brahma, Vishnureva Sanatanaha. So he is the fellow who has put us in this jail called samsara. He has locked us in. He's got the key. So he is the fellow who has to use that key and unlock this samsara and release us from this prison. Is the literal meaning of Skanda Purana, which resonates quite well for us. So in that sense, we all need to get ourselves not only detached from the material world, Dridena Asanga Shastrena Chitva, but we also do Dridena Sanga Shastrena Chitva, because he's the guy who's put us in moksha, in samsara in the first place. So that is why this Shodashakala Purushaha concept comes again. We all know that Lakshmi and the three aspects of Lakshmi ties the jiva to the material world. But even the Lakshmi is not an independent entity in Vedic pantheon. She is ever mukta, she is ever liberated, but she is always under she is Vishnu's consort, she is always under her control. So it is under the direction of Vishnu that Lakshmi ties this jiva to this 15 fences. So now what we can understand from that is, although Lakshmi ties us into material world, there are two possibilities. Can we go to Lakshmi and plead for us to remove us from samsara, or do we plead Vishnu to remove us from samsara and then take us away, cut the samsara from us? Krishna talks about this in subsequent chapters. In the previous chapters, he has talked about this. And even in the Rig Veda, this comes in. So the view there is, yes, Lakshmi can release you, but she is very tough. Yeah. In the material world, mothers are very lenient, fathers are very tough. Whereas in the trans-empirical world, mother is very tough, father is very lenient. So the Shastra says, go to your father, man, he is very lenient. He will remove you from samsara. So that is the view that it's very beautiful when you read that in Rig Veda and also deal with that chapter in Gita. We'll hopefully come to that at some point. So one view there is we need to have this asanga or the sangha attachment to God, because that is the only possibility for our release. Look at Katha Upanishad again. Na ayam atma pravachanena labhyaha, na medaya, na bahuna shrutena, yam evaisha vrunute tena labhyaha. Tasya esha atma vivrunute tanun swam. You can read, you can memorize, you can do all sorts of stuff. But ultimately, you know what? He decides whom he is going to release. It's his discretion, which is his grace, his divine grace. To achieve the divine grace, you need to do all this. Yeah. Asanga shastrena dridena chitva. And this is why I know we have dealt with this before, the ladder of Vedic philosophy. And what is that? Let's not spend time with the Sanskrit verses. We have done it so many times before. So I'll just go from bottom to top. Actually, if we have time, let's do it. It's beautiful verse. Paramatmano atyanta bhinyasya swatah chidananda atmakasyapi jivasya anadi avidya kama karmadi nimittaha ayam paramartata eva anyata karaha dukkadi anartaha na parameshwara prasadat rute apagacchati nacha asakshad kruto asau prasidati nacha avidita swarupaha shakyate sakshat kartum iti sakala guna karataya nishesha dosha gandha vidurayata chatam pratipadayitum asesha amnayaha pravartante tad upakarana bhuta cha brahma mimamsa iti paramartaha. I'm never tired of reciting this because that summarizes the philosophy. So how does it go? He can be known only through the Vedas, interpreted with the aid of Brahmasutras. So that is your Shastra, Drudena Shastra, your knowledge, that you know about the God through Drudena Shastra. And how do you know him? He is to be known as an abode of infinite auspicious attributes and without any defects. Now, unless we know him this way, we cannot see him. Unless we see him, we cannot obtain his grace. God's grace is absolutely essential for the release of bondage. Therefore, dridena shastrena chitva. So, having that knowledge becomes prerequisite. So, Vyasa, Krishna, when he says dridena asanga shastrena chitva, chitva there means you don't cut a tree. It is not breaking down the tree. Chitva means dissection. You use a knife and dissect. Why do you dissect in your anatomy? So that you gain the knowledge of the human anatomy. Similarly, you dissect, you discriminate and find out, do research and get the knowledge. That is the meaning of chitva there. Chitva means not break, cut down the tree. Chitva means discrimination and getting the right knowledge through dissection, discrimination, shravana, manana, dhyana. And that is how you get the right knowledge. So that is how this journey has to be. And again, that is summarized in Mundaka Upanishad. So let me just finish off this today's session. Pre-creation, jivas, they have linga sharira, they have karmas. After creation, God gives them gross bodies, they come into existence, they do their sadhanas. And eventually, the karmas will go, if you are going through the right path, you will reduce all your karmas. And you will reach a state where the jiva is there, his linga sharira is there, but there is no karma imprints. That means they'll never have another birth. At that point, what will happen is te brahma lokeshu parantakale param amrutaha parim uchayanti sarve. Mundaka Upanishad gives this very clearly, where it says is, once you have no karmic reactions, you go sit with Brahma, Chaturmukha Brahma in Satyaloka, and wait for Parantakale. Parantakale means when the universe gets dissolved. When this 100 years of Brahma is finished, when the universe gets dissolved, then at that point, what you will do is, you will have the dip in that Viraja Nadi, as it's called, the sea of that river that separates between material and non-material planes. You will have a dip in that river and you will shed your linga sharira, and as a pristine jiva, you go to the other side, to the Supreme's abode, or Vaikunta, Shvetadipa, Anantasana, whatever you want to call it. You go to the abode and there you spend eternity there. So this is the grand view of the Vedic philosophy and the Upanishads. And what amazes me is, in 2.5 verses to 3 verses, Veda Vyasa has actually, in every word that he has used in this chapter 15, in the first 3 verses, he's actually summarized the whole concept for us. Now, what he is going to do in the subsequent verses is, what are the specific things that the Jiva has to do in the next 2 verses? And then how does he need to know that Supreme? We said the bottom line is, you need to know through the Vedas and the Upanishad the nature of the Supreme. And if you want to know what should you know him as, and Vyasa, Krishna, summarizes that in about 15 verses to talk about the Supreme. So I think what will happen from the next session is, the first 2 to 3 verses of chapter 15 is the toughest. It is the most cryptic and more esoteric philosophy that is hidden in the first 3 verses. And I'm pleased that we have crossed that, and we have crossed that river, and we have gone to the other side now. And hopefully the next 15 verses will be more easily navigatable, because we have spent the last 7-8 months talking about these concepts anyway, so that should flow quite smoothly for us. So I'll stop there, and thank you for listening, and thanks for an interactive session. Krishna Pranam.
Yeah. Madhu, thank you, man. That was very much, what can I say, very much exciting lecture, actually. There's so much of stuff today, so much knowledge and so much of things to take in. I'm just thinking, one comment is like, is all our Vedas and Upanishads just a science, isn't it? This is this, it's about the science which has been put in a different form for generations to understand. Complete science, complete cosmic science.
Yeah, very well put, Sudarshan. So you have physics and you have metaphysics. Yes, physical science is all the upadana karana, as we call it, of how things operate. That's what we are all doing in our professional lives. We are all, this universe is there. We are just trying to figure out how the universe is working. That is all physical science. Whereas our Vedas and Upanishads is metaphysical science. The Vedas are asking, why is that working in such particular way? Who is making it to work in such a particular way? What is the nature of that person who is making things happen in such a way? I.e., who is the efficient cause of everything? That is the metaphysical science. So it is no doubt it is science, but it is an intuitional science. It is not with empirical this thing, but it is actually deep intuition that our rishis have had in deep meditations, that they have seen these concepts and they've passed it down the generation. So yes, fully agree. It's science. It's not some musings of ancient Stone Age men in some caves. And I've seen some articles by certain so-called academics of the West talking about our Vedas as musings of Stone Age men in caves. And I can only pray and hope that God gives such people who make such comments some mercy.
The other thing is, my only other question is, if this is all science, where does bhakti come from? What is the need for bhakti?
So Sudarshan, bhakti is, so if you remember that Dasa Pramiti lecture by Mukund, and if you look at the 10 ladders, first in that ladder is jnana, then comes bhakti, then comes vairagya, and you build up the Dasa Pramiti, yeah, to reach your goal. So jnana and bhakti are inseparable. Each one is sort of influences and positively reinforces the other. Yeah. So when you love somebody, you can't just carry on with blind love. You need to know who that person is and what is he, how good is he, how much does he earn, how many cars does he have, and how beautiful he is, and what is his personality, and so on. Unless you have all these details, I don't think that love is going to last long. So that bhakti, or the love as we say, that needs to be go along with jnana. Without jnana and bhakti, there is no proper bhakti, and dry jnana is not going to take us to salvation. Bhakti, which is not well informed, has its limitations. So both needs to happen. For both things to happen, you need karma that actually feeds into it, because the act of jnana, the act of knowing, picking up a book and studying, is karma. the act of doing puja or the satsang that we are doing is also a karma, but with a motivation of love to the Supreme. So karma feeds into bhakti and jnana simultaneously. It is all one nice cocktail that we need to have. But the starting point for it is you need to have the recipe first. If you want to have a cocktail, you need to have a recipe. That recipe is knowledge and jnana. So they all feed into each other.
Okay, thanks for that. I think we need maybe not today, or maybe we need a lecture on what does it really, God is omnipotent. He doesn't need you, isn't it? Like, if this science is there completely, he doesn't need you. It's you who need him and his knowledge and everything. So it's a question of maybe what makes us, what are the things which we need to do to be elevated, to elevate our consciousness. So that's something which we need to talk one day.
Yes, definitely. Yes, yeah. So where do you start? So if somebody has asked me, where are you means it reminds one of my gurus said, we are nowhere. So in this journey, my guru was telling when we had one of his lectures, he said, when you should ask yourself, where are you? You will realize all of us are nowhere in this journey. So there's a lot of work needs to be done. Yes.
Madhu,
Sorry,
can
we had
I
some.
ask
Yes.
something? Madhu?
Yes, please. Sheila ji,
Uh,
please go on.
in the Vedas, the Samaveda, Shvetaketu comes from Chandogya, which is Samaveda, isn't it? And in that, you said when he came from his Gurukula, he knew only what is taught in Shastras and everything, but he didn't know what it is. So he came with the ego that he knows everything. Whereas his own brother Nachiketa, they were brothers, you said in this class. He was a jnani, isn't he? When he went to Yama, he knew that what his father was not doing right, and because his father said he will give him to Yama, he went to Yamaloka and asked him a question which we would never have understood. Unless we go into Kathopanishad. So, what is this difference in Samaveda and Krishna Yajurveda?
Yeah. So yeah, it's a nice story. Actually, when you start reading about that Shvetaketu and Nachiketa and you kind of analyze their personalities, it's quite interesting. So as you know, they are so the Vedas talk about Uddalaka Aruni. Yeah. So this Uddalaka is the rishi, and it says Uddalaka Aruni. Aruni means Aruna is the mother. So the Upanishad, it says there was this fellow called Uddalaka who is Aruna's son. We don't know who Uddalaka's dad is. Yeah, and I don't think there is a mention about who Uddalaka's wife is, what is her name. But we know that it's Uddalaka Aruni, who is the son of Aruna, who was a very knowledgeable Rishika. Yeah, so that we know. So Uddalaka had two sons. One is Shvetaketu and the other one is Nachiketa. And the Upanishads give a lot of hint about what their personality was. Shvetaketu was an extrovert, and he was very boisterous, he was extrovert, and he always talks a lot. Whereas Nachiketa has been introvert, and he never spoke much. He was always be a quiet boy, and there is a history behind as to why he became quiet. Once his dad takes him to an yajna and he talks something, and then he's made to shut up and all that. So, but anyway, he is a very introvert fellow. So personality wise, both of them are different. Shvetaketu is an extrovert, Nachiketa is an introvert, and they go through their lives. And as you mentioned, Shvetaketu, for 12 years of his life, he is a naughty errant who is going around very boisterous, playful, naughty, not interested in studies. So his dad, Uddalaka, throws him out of the house and says, go and study to Gurukula, man. Go and spend 12 years and then learn something, do something in your life and come back. So he goes for 12 years, and then Chaturvamsha, he comes after 24 years home with a lot of pride that he has learned. But actually he learned the superficial sense of the Vedas, but he never understood the deep meanings of Vedas. So I believe those days in the Gurukulas, the gurus will not impart knowledge so easily. You will have to work on it. It has to be a lot of your effort to gain knowledge. All the gurus would do is direct you in the right direction to gain knowledge for yourself. There was no spoon feeding that was happening in Gurukulas those days. So similarly, Shvetaketu goes for 12 years. He assumes that he has learned everything, just the superficial sense of the Vedas, and then he comes back and he is very arrogant. Yeah, and then you know the rest of the story in
Yeah.
Chandogya Upanishad. And then what happens is the story of Shvetaketu and Uddalaka actually goes on. So there is this episode of Tattvamasi, and the chapter 6 of Chandogya Upanishad goes on, talks about this interaction between Uddalaka and Shvetaketu. But the story of their philosophical journey doesn't stop there. You know what happens after some time? They actually go to a king. There is a king who is a great philosopher. That also comes in the Upanishad. There is a king who goes to the king. Amma, king ಹೆಸರೇನು? Janakana. I forget the name of the king. So he goes to the king, and the king asks him a few questions, and the Shvetaketu does not know the answer for that. So he comes back to his dad, and he asks his dad, this king fellow who is such a great philosopher asked me some questions, but I didn't know the answer. Do you know the answer? But Uddalaka says, you know what, Shvetaketu, even I don't know the answer. Let's both go and learn from this king. So that incident is very interesting, because in those days, this Kshatriya, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya,
Although is it
Shudra,
Jana Shruti?
Jana Shruti, not Jana Shruti, sir. Oh, I forgot the king's name. Maybe next week I'll tell you. Jnana Shruti, maybe Sudarshan.
No,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have
I think you're right.
Chandogya Upanishad. I can go look into it. Yeah.
I don't know which king it is, but anyway, so there are a lot of the story of Shvetaketu and Uddalaka. It goes, and it's very interesting how, and it also gives you an idea of how the Vedic civilization was, where everything was vertical, nothing was horizontal. People moved from one ashrama, one varana to the other based on their capacities. Nothing was rigid. So that is very clear when you read that. Now coming back to our Nachiketa, who was an introvert, but introverts, as you know, still waters always run deep. So Shvetaketu was a running water, whereas Nachiketa was still, but he always ran deep, and he learned a lot of stuff, and he knew a lot of philosophy already. So that contrasting things is quite interesting. Yes. So that is their life histories, and you can read about all this when you read Upanishads in various translations that are available. But your bigger question is, what is the link between Krishna Yajurveda and Samaveda?
And Samaveda, yeah.
And Samaveda. This is just to remind remind all of us that Vedas as such is only one. Yeah, Veda is Anantavai Veda, and there are three types: Gadya, Padya, and Gana. Those are the primary divisions of Vedas. Veda as a large body is one, but this large body of text is expressed in three types. One is Gadya. Gadya means poetry. Padya means prose. Padya means poetry, Gadya means prose, and then Gana means music. So all forms of human communication can only be in three types: either poetry or prose or music. There is nothing outside this communication. So that is the primary classification of Vedas. Whereas this classification of Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharvana Veda is more Shaka. It is a branch. It is just that portion of the Vedas that were given by Vyasa to that particular rishi who just conserved that. Those days, nothing was written, right? Everything had to come from saying and somebody hearing and memorizing and then passing down the generation. So it is only a shaka or a branch. But actually, Vedas are not four types. Vedas are only three. That's why it is called Trayi. One of the names for Vedas, it is called Trayi, and there are people who are called Trivedis who know Trayi. Trayi means Gadya Padya Gana. Whereas Chaturvedi, some fellows are called Chaturvedis, although they may not know any Vedas, they still have Chaturvedi surnames, because Chaturvedis is these four branches. So it is a separation that Vyasa has given to the rishis so that Vedas can be conserved. So in that sense, there is no difference that way. But Sama in Chandogya Upanishad, lots of things are in music. Yeah. Whereas Krishna Yajurveda, everything is in prose. The chandas of Yajurveda is different. There are slightly different types of chandas that is used. But if you look at Samaveda and Rig Veda, as you know, Samaveda is much of the Rig Veda set in music is Samaveda. So that way they are related, the way they are structured, but Vedas are only three. Sorry, I don't know whether I answered your questions, but
No. Thank you.
Mr. Madhu sir, something to add
Yeah.
here. What you say is correct. Samaveda has verses. Most of the verses are Rigvedic verses. it also has Yajurveda verses. For example, Rudram in Yajurveda also comes in Samaveda, but in a song form. And another thing to add, Rigveda, Yajurvedas have usually three types of swaras. It's called Udatta, Anudatta, and Swarita. But in Samaveda, there are 7 swaras, something similar to music. Sare, Gama, Pada, Ni. So there are 7 different pitches in which you recite. And the other main classification, you also said that the Rigveda is a poetic, the poetic verses were collected or divided under Rigveda, and the Gadya, more Gadya form was under Yajurveda, and the Gana form was under Samaveda. When Vedavyasa passed on these things, he divided in this way. But there are instances of Rigveda and Yajurveda having the same verses, but it is told in a different way.
Sure,
Recited
thank
in
you.
a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. Purushottama is a classic example. Yeah, thank you.
Madhusudan, this is Harish. I had one question. On one of the pages, you talk about this whole point on unless you know him, you cannot see him. So where is that source from? I would be curious to learn more about that.
So that is a verse from Jayatirtha in Upadhi Kandana Tika. Yeah. So Acharya did. So there is so the Kandana Traya, that is talking about Mayavada, Prapancha Mithyatva, and Upadhi. The concept of Upadhi, and when he gives Avatarika, introduction to that verse, to that work of Upadhi Kandanatika, Jayatirtha gives this Avatarika and summarizes. The very first word he uses is Paramatmano Atyanta Binnasya. We souls are infinitely different from the Supreme. Yeah. Whereas, as you know from the Advaita doctrine, is Aham Brahma Asmi. That is their first verse. Me and souls are same, whereas Jayatirtha starts this, me and God are infinitely different. So there are two extreme views here. So to discuss the concepts as to what is Upadhi and so on, Jayatirtha's Avatarika is there. So refer Jayatirtha's Avatarika, very first Avatarika. This is Avatarika of Upadhi Kandana.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Madhu. It was again, we can sort of describe in words how useful these sessions are, and we'll give Madhu a big hand, and we'll meet again next week. Yeah, thank you, Madhu.
Thank you, Madhu.
Thank you.
Something to ask here, Madhu sir.
Yeah.
Because I have been attending this session from only last week. Do you have the recording of the earlier?
Yeah,
we have our YouTube channel, isn't it?
Yeah.
So Manjuna, all the records are up to date. So everything is on the YouTube channel as of last week. So today's recording hopefully will go in on a Thursday or Friday. So we are dependent on Abhijit, who is currently in Kerala, in Chennai, and he must be very busy. So when he finds some time, he is able to upload it onto the YouTube channel. So I think we are up to date as far as I can tell.
No, I think Madhu, there is last week's lecture is not there, and only the first.
So Deval, it's gone in. It went in last night. Recheck again. So I know that because I was liaising with Abhijit. It's there.
Okay, so is it different to the website then?
Yeah, if you go to Hindu Knowledge Academy YouTube channel.
Okay.
You'll find it there. I believe there is a lag from the YouTube channel to go into the website. It takes some time. I don't understand it, but somehow it takes time.
But he had done it very nicely, Abhijit. You just have to press and all the all the classes, whichever you have taken, they come in a row. So it's really nice. It's easy to access also.
Yeah, I'll send you the link again today. The YouTube channel has been created specifically for this purpose, and it is going very well. Yes, just put your comments as well in the YouTube channel, please.
Thank you very much.
I've just got a question. Can I ask, or is it too late?
Yeah, go on.
So just taking Sudarshan's point further, I think he made a comment that we need him as in God, the other way around. But in Gita, there are lots of shlokas where he keeps saying a certain kinds of people are mama priya. So is that statement true, or is there
Sure.
again
So for
there are
example,
many
if-
meanings to it?
Yeah. So I think the last bit is right. There are many meanings to it. Prani Jnanino Atyartha Priyam Sacha Mama Priyaha, for example, is a classic example. Jnani is like me and I also like them. Yeah. So those kind of things are there. So he is not dependent on that. If somebody says God creates us and brings us into samsara so that he can have a loving relationship with us, I'm sorry, that's flawed philosophy. God has done a great service to us to bring us into samsara so that we can find our destination, and he has given all the provisions for us to act out our swabhava and then reach him. So he gives all the facilities for us. So there is a famous sutra called Na Prayojanavatvat, that is Veda Vyasa's final say in this. And if Veda Vyasa says in Brahmasutra, that is a Supreme Court order, there is nothing against this. He says Na Prayojanavatvat. He has no use. He takes no use in his creation. Yeah, he does it for our benefit so that we reach him. So that is the view there. So if you take sutras, which is the Supreme Court order, he has no use. From a very poetic and from that kind, it's more poetic to say that he loves and he becomes your servant. And yeah, fine, that is very poetic. But the reality on the ground is, this fellow doesn't need us. We need him for every aspect, every step that we take. We need him. So it is a one-way traffic, but he still, with his mercy, he does all the other things. So please remember that sutra, na prayojanavatvat. So that probably will answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madhu. Yeah, we'll finish this session now. Is it okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank
give Madhu a
you.
big hand. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Madhu.
No worries. Thank you. Let me just.
Thank you, Madhu. Thank you, Susa.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madhu sir.
Thanks, Madhu.
Bye.
Bye, bye, everybody. Bye, Dhanalakshmi.
Bye.
Bye,
Thank
bye.
you.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.